Why Christians Should Care About Their Nation. Title topic of today's Daily Dose. So, I don't know if you've noticed, but we kind of are living in a woke, progressive, secular culture. And it tells Christians that we're supposed to stay out of the affairs of our nation. In other words, keep it to yourselves. Keep it in the four walls of the church. And then when Christians do speak up and show up, we're criticized and we're called names like Christian nationalists. For those of you who didn't know, this term is derogatory. It's used in a negative way. But here's my question. Shouldn't we want more of Christ and his goodness in our nation? Is that a bad thing? Of course, there's a right and wrong way to do this, but wanting more of Jesus, more of Christ, more of God's goodness in our nation is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I want to present a few reasons why Christians should show up and speak up in our nation, in our towns, in our cities, and in our states. Number one, why should we show up? Why should we speak up? Why do we need to be present? Because people live in nations and people matter. That's why we care about our nation. People matter to God, and so they matter to us. And yes, we're called to care for people, like for real, care for them. In fact, when people are being mistreated, God's people, Christians, we have a responsibility to step in and do something about it. Check out what it says. Here we are in this is Psalm 82. Psalm 82 says, "Defend the weak and the fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and the destitute." In other words, maintain the rights of the poor and the oppressed. That's another way of saying that. And then rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. In other words, what are we reading here in Psalm 82? Christians, God's people, we have a responsibility to show up, speak up, and actually care. Do something. When people are hurting, do something about it. We have a responsibility to exert godly influence on our culture and in our nation. In fact, Scripture tells us to have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Meaning, when we see evil and pain being caused to people in this world, we need to once again do something about it. That's Ephesians 5:11, by the way. See, God tells us to speak up when people, when governments, companies, when laws, when school systems, when healthcare, and when twisted agendas, when those things are hurting people, Christians are to speak up and show up. Imagine what would have happened in Germany if the Christians would have been unified and bold in exposing the deeds of the Nazis and of Hitler. All that darkness, all that evil, what would have happened? Maybe we could have avoided the Holocaust. Christians must care enough about our nation, care enough about people that we actually speak up and we show up with compassion and with truth. By the way, being Christians in our nation is not Christian nationalism. Bringing Christ into every sphere of our culture is not Christian nationalism. Advocating for biblical principles, even in government and in politics, it's not Christian nationalism. Rather, it's simply being and simply caring. Okay, so why should Christians care about our nation? Here's the second reason, number two, because we want our nation to prosper. We want our nation to prosper economically, spiritually, in all ways that are good. Look, God instructs his people. Here it is in Jeremiah 29. He instructs his people, he says, also to seek the peace and prosperity, other versions say, demand the welfare of the city to which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it. Because if it prospers, if the city, the nation, if it prospers, you too will prosper. Again, that's Jeremiah 29, verse 7. So we want our city, we want our state, we want our nation to be blessed and to prosper. We want God's goodness for our community. And this is another biblical reason, Christian reason, why we should be actively seeking and praying for prosperity and goodness all over our nation. This place where God has planted us for such a time as this. Look, we should be engaging in all areas of our community and our nation, including government and politics. I'm telling you, we need to be there. The light needs to show up. You know what I'm saying? There's no place that doesn't need God's goodness, his truth, his ways, and of course, his love. Speaking of love, I love the state slogan of Arizona. Our state slogan in Arizona is Ditat Deus. That means God enriches. And as Christians, we know this. We know that God enriches. And we should now be those who are his salt and his light, his ambassadors who are charged with bringing peace and prosperity and enriching our nation, our state, and our community. Christians should not only care about our nation, we must care enough to speak up and show up in our nation, in our community. We got to be who we are. We just got to say what we know and give what we have. Now, here's my final charge. Go and show up and go and care.